assess the validity of Scripture and looking at the facts. Looking at how you can prove that the Bible that we have today is valid and accurate, even though we don't have some of the original copies. So let's start off by looking at the Bible. What is it? Who wrote it? Where did it come from? First off, the Bible, it was written by approximately 40 different authors. So when we have something written by 40 different authors, the question is, how do we prove that that was what was supposed to be there? Also, it was written over a time period of 1,600 years. So what was said at the beginning, we need to see if that was the same as what was said at the end of the Bible. So what was the Bible written on? They did not have books like they did nowadays. So it was written in various materials. It was written in clay. Ezekiel 4:1 talks about that. It says, "Now, son of man, take a block of clay, put it in front of you, and draw the city of Jerusalem on it." Also, in Exodus 24:12, it mentions being written in stone. That was the 10 Commandments. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with law and commandments I have written for their instruction." Some parts of it were also originally written in metal. You have Exodus 28:36. Make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it as on a seal, holy to the Lord. Also, some parts were written in papyrus. In Revelation 5:1, you have, "Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And it was also written in vellum, parchment, and leather. In 2 Timothy 4:13, you have Paul speaking. He says, "When you come, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas and my scrolls, especially the parchments." So, where does that leave us? How do we get where we are? How was the Bible translated to what we have nowadays? How was it passed down from its original form? The Old Testament was translated primarily by the Talmudic scribes, and there were very, very strict rules to preserve its accuracy that they had to adhere to. For example, the scroll had to be made of a skin, and the skin had to be from a ceremonial clean animal. Each skin also had to contain a specified number of columns equal throughout the entire book. And this was universal for every single copy that was written. The length of each column had to extend no less than 48 lines and no more than 60 lines. So that was consistent every single time that they copied the book. The column breadth also was going to consist of exactly 30 letters. If it did not meet that criteria, they would have to start again. The space of the thread must appear between each consonant. So they were measuring. That's how accurate they were getting, down to the spacing between it. The breadth of 9 consonants had to be inserted between each section. So again, they're making it that accurate. Between each book of the original, there was a space of 3 lines. When we look at Deuteronomy itself, that one had to end with a full line to be considered accurate. Nothing could be copied from memory. So it wasn't that the scribes had it memorized and they were just copying what they thought was theirs. They had to check every letter. They would go back and forth, 1 letter at a time. And also the scribes had to count the number of times each letter of the alphabet occurred each time it was written, each book as it was, and compare that to the original. Then also looking at the New Testament. The New Testament, they did not follow the same type of rules because it was not the Hebrew scribes that were doing it. It was a lot looser. Primarily, it was written in Greek and Aramaic. And the Jewish leadership did not endorse Christianity, so they were not going to give them those same standards. So, if anything, the New Testament is going to be the one that is the least accurate. However, you're going to see that that's actually not the case. So, when we look at the Bible, where it came from, the original writing is long gone. The only thing that we have are these copies that we just talked about. The copies of the copies of the copies. Which leaves us with a question. How do we know that what we're holding today is what was originally written by the biblical authors? Do we know that that was really what the prophets wrote, or was this just one scribe copied it wrong, and now we hold that as true? So we really need to look back and look at it textually. How do we know that this is the truth? This is what the biblical authors intended for the Bible to say. There's various methods that we can use. One of the biggest ones is looking at textual criticism. And what this is, it's a literary technique that's used to test documents of antiquity, older documents, and it's used for all types of documents. This is not limited to religious. It's not something you can say, oh, this was changed, this was altered, this is just to prove something, right? This is what any historian would use for any historical document. When we look at the textual reliability standards, that's looking at how many manuscripts we have, how many of these old copies do we have that still exist today, and also the age. How close to the original are we going back? Well, when we look at this, some other old works of antiquity, they're really not comparable to what we have for the Bible. When we look at Caesar's Gallic Wars, there's only 10 manuscripts known that we still have. And the earliest one that we have is 1,000 years after the original writing. However, no one doubts that what we read in those concerning Julius Caesar's exploits in the Gallic Wars, everyone believes that those are true. There's nothing controversial about that. It's considered factual. But like I said, that's based on only 10 manuscripts that are over 1,000 years from the original being copied like that. Also, the closest one that we have to number as far as the New Testament is Homer's Iliad, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. The earliest one that we have of that dates 400 years after Homer originally wrote it, and there's 643. However, when we look at that, we have the story of the Trojan horse, which everyone pretty much knows about, how they would sneak inside of the horse to get that story. It's considered fact, no one doubts it. Yet, like I said, that's based on 643 manuscripts dating 400 years after. So there was 400 years of copying that went on. But as far as historians go, they accept that as valid. Now, in comparison, the New Testament, at this time, they have over 25,000 manuscripts, or partial manuscripts, that are available in the New Testament. So this was the one that was not even copied as exactly. And we have 25,000 of these. The earliest copy, which is actually a portion of John, is 50 years after John wrote it. So the closest manuscript we have is from 50 years after John wrote it, and we've got 25,000 of these manuscripts that are available. So looking at these manuscripts, I guess the biggest question is, are there errors? Are there contradictions? Does it, is it the same or is it different? Is this one that we're looking at that was 50 years after John? Does it look like what we have today? Well, the first thing is there are a lot of errors. There are a lot of contradictions when you look at it numerically. When we look at the New Testament in those manuscripts that I talked about, with the Greek New Testament, there's about 138,000 words. However, when we look at the variations, there's 300,000 to 400,000 variations that they have found historians. So your automatic response is, well, there's more mistakes or contradictions than there are words. So obviously, this doesn't make any sense, this is wrong, this is all fallacy, this is just copying things that don't make any sense. However, there's a lot more to that. When we really look at the nature of these mistakes, what are we talking about? We say there's contradictions, there's mistakes in the Bible. They don't coincide. Well, when we look at the mistakes, 75% of them are mistakes in spelling. Spelling difference. One of the biggest ones is how they spell John. Some copies have J-O-H-N, some have J-O-H-N-N. Now, when you look at that, does that mean that he wasn't John? No, by no means. So 75% of your mistakes, if we just consider a spelling error, which would be common, you got 75% of those mistakes are already gone. There's no difference. Then when we look at the remaining 25%, 24% of the quote-unquote mistakes would be synonyms, words that mean the same thing. For example, Jesus and Lord are often used interchangeably, along with the pronoun him or he, and those type of things. They're not really changing the meaning, arguably. It's the same thing, Jesus, Lord, he. It's just a variation. That's not going to change the meaning. Of those remaining mistakes or contradictions, 1% of the mistakes involve a change in meaning. You see that in 1 John 1:4. Thus we are writing these things so that our joy may be complete, or thus we are writing these things so that your joy may be complete. And again, that's going to be the same virtual meaning, R, E-R. So, in conclusion, when we look at textual criticism, we can use it to prove that the scripture that we are reading today is the same as the biblical authors intended. Thank you.